Well, hello everyone, and welcome to another edition of the DC Capstone Report. It's great to be back with you again, getting ready for this week's game, the third Saturday in October. Well, I just want to thank everyone out there for listening. You've just really shown us a lot of love, listening to our podcast. The number of listeners we've had continues to increase, and Lance and I really appreciate that. We thank you for your loyalty to continue to listen to our podcast on Alabama football. Well, today on the podcast, in the first segment, we're going to take a look and review the Texas A&M game. In our second segment, we're going to talk about our standout players for the game against Texas A&M. In our third and final segment, we're going to preview the upcoming game against the Tennessee Volunteers.
You're listening to the DC Capstone Report. The DC Capstone Report is featured each Tuesday morning on the Martin Houston Show at Tide 100.9. You can listen live at Tide100.9.com.
Well, in our first segment today, we want to take a look back at the Texas A&M game. Overall, I think it was a good game for Alabama. I know there's been a lot of people out there that like to talk about, well, what's wrong with our defense? The defense is giving up too many points. But I really saw this game against Texas A&M a completely different way. And my analysis was that we really improved on defense. And what I want to do is explain that a little bit for some of the people out there that are saying, hey, we're not as good on defense. I think we're not as good on defense because we're judging against perfect, great defensive teams we've had in the past where we held everybody to 9 or 10 points a game. And I just don't think this team is made up like that. In the early beginnings of the podcast, way back before the season ever started, I talked about how young our defense was. And then we got even younger when some players went out for injuries for the full year. So this is a young defense. We knew going in it was going to be a learning curve, and that's what's taking place. What I love to see is the improvement that we made from week to week. I think we made a big improvement from Ole Miss to Texas A&M, and I say that because of two things mainly. One is I saw more communication on the defense than I've had in the past as far as getting the right plays in, the right players in, and there's still some room for improvement in that, but it was really improved in this game. I saw some substitutions that looked good. I saw getting the players in the right positions in this game. And secondly, it looked like we had a break from our injuries to the point where we had our outside linebackers on the field for the game, for the entire game that we needed to play them. And that being Terrell Lewis and Anthony Jennings playing together for the first time. And both of them seemed to have a really good explosive first step. So I really thought that was good on our defense. Now, did we have some lapses? Yes. But if you look in this game, we were up 4 touchdowns when our defense began to have some lapses. And I think a couple of things. One is early on when we were trading touchdowns with them, they scored on the first drive. We came back, we scored. Then we started to build up a lead. I think we were getting them in the right positions from the sideline. We were getting them in the right plays. We were doing all those things. I really believe that later in the game, as we had a 4-touchdown lead, the coaches allowed the young players to try to learn a little bit on the job, getting in the right plays themselves, making the right calls themselves on the field. And I think at that time we got exposed a little bit with our youth and getting in the wrong play, wrong coverage a couple of times, and that caused some of the drives to be extended and that sort of thing. But overall, I thought our defensive production in the game was very good. I thought Terrell Lewis had a great game. I thought Anthony Jennings had a great game. Xavier McKinney, another great game. And they put good pressure on the quarterback. For the most part, contained him. He got away and made some great athletic plays on a couple of plays. But for the most part, did a good job of making him throw from the pocket several times, getting sacks on him. Christian Barrymore getting a good push up front. I really think he's improved. I think they're finding a role for Markel Benton to come in and play, to give Christian Harris a break so he doesn't have to play the entire game, and that's really helped Christian Harris as well. So I think overall a good defensive showing, and I think we improved. I look for some more improvement as we go into this next game. On the offensive side of the ball, it seems like somebody else always shows up and becomes a focal point. And in this game, it appeared to be Jalen Waddle. I think if you listen to last week's podcast, that was my prediction that Jalen Waddle was going to have a big game in this game, and that proved to be correct because he came out. He's from Texas. He has his family in the stands. He's playing against people, kids that he knew that went to Texas A&M, and he comes to Alabama, and I think he just really puts on a show. Henry Ruggs may be the fastest, but I think that Jalen Waddle is the quickest. And what I mean by that, if you watch them both, Jalen Waddle has a quick first step, a quick acceleration for the first couple of steps to get away from someone. Henry Ruggs has great speed, overall speed, and top-end speed. But if you watch that pass that Waddle took for a touchdown, that first two steps, and he was gone from the receivers, and they just couldn't catch up with him. And he just did a really good job. He did a great job on special teams as well in this game. I think special teams play was a big part of this game. Jalen Waddle's special teams play put us in short fields many times. We don't have a good punting game, so we can't flip the field with our punter right now. Our punting game is just not very good. I just call it like I see it. It's not very good right now. But what we did use was the return game to flip the field. And they had a great punter. They outkicked his coverage, and he had to make several tackles on punts and on kickoffs because of outkicking his coverage. And I think that it was really good to see our special teams come up and compensate and flip the field with our special team return yards, and Jalen Waddle was a big part of that. So I think also on special teams, being able to pressure their punter and get a blocked punt that turned into by Ali Cahoe that turned into a touchdown for Terrell Shavers, I think was another big edge that gave us on our special teams. We're still suspect in our kicking. Our kickoffs were fairly good, and our kick coverage was great. But we hit the uprights twice in this game. We had a very bad punt for like 13 yards. Just didn't get a good punting game, so I'm still concerned about our kicking game. On our offensive side, I think Tua played a really good game. They pressured him. They got some pressure on him, and he was able to elude the pressure, able to make some quick throws. He beat him on the slant, beat him on some deep balls. I thought he played a really good game this game. I thought our running game was good. Najee Harris over 100 yards again. So I think second consecutive game he's over 100 yards. I don't think it's any coincidence that Deontay Brown is in for those two games. And I really believe that Deontay Brown is a great run blocker. I've sung his praises for a year now on this podcast, and I really think Deontay Brown makes a difference in our offense. But the big move in this game, I think, because of Chris Owens' injury, Landon Dickerson comes in and moves to center. With Landon Dickerson at center and Deontay Brown at guard and Evan Neal at guard, the middle of that offensive line was so shored up that on run blocking, they were just mauling the players. I really believe that Landon Dickerson is our best center. The best combination that we've seen is Dickerson at center and Deontay Brown and Evan Neal at the guards with Jedrick Wills and Leatherwood at the tackles. And I believe if we can use that going forward, we're going to gain some momentum off of this line, gelling together, coming together, playing. I think Landon Dickerson affects the other linemen. I think the other linemen playing more aggressive. And it was seen in this game. I don't think Dickerson gave up any sacks and no hurries up the middle. Deontay Brown was a mauler. Jedrick Wills and Leatherwood really set the edges on blocking and pulling. And if you can pull your tackles, then you know you got a good play at your center and your guard positions. And then you can pull your guard, you know you got a good play at your tackle positions. And Alabama did everything in this game. They pulled tackles, they pulled guards, they pulled tight ends. They pulled Kendall Randolph into the tight end and pulled him as well. So I think overall offensive line has improved. That was the biggest improvement in this game, offensive line. And I think our defense has improved. So I was just very impressed with the game. Glad we got out of Texas A&M with a victory. It's a hard place to play. I think our youth on defense learned from this game, playing in that atmosphere, and it's going to help us down the road as we end our season on the road at Auburn. I think you're going to see our youth a little more seasoned, a little better to play, and make better decisions because of the way we handled this Texas A&M game. So overall, just a good performance on defense, good performance on offense, and on our special team return and coverage game, but not very good on our kicking game. Well, here in the second segment, we'll take a look at our standout players of the game. Let's start with our standout players on offense. I think I'm going to give it to three players on offense that I've talked about already, but Jalen Waddle definitely was a standout and a spark on our offense. I think he did a really good job in pass patterns in running the routes and catching the ball. And I really think he gave us a spark on some of those plays where they were really covering our other receivers. And so I really think Jalen Waddle did a good job. He's one of my standout players of the game. Also, Landon Dickerson, I think, was just a great addition at center, and Deontay Brown on offense. Those two, to me, together really make the offensive line just a formidable line. I really believe that combination of Landon Dickerson at center and Deontay Brown at guard is going to bode well for us late in the year. I believe it's going to help our run game, and we saw that with another 100-yard rusher this week against a really stingy Texas A&M defense. And I think it's going to be a big help. So our offensive standout players of the game are Jalen Waddle, Landon Dickerson, and Deontay Brown. On defense, I was pleased to see Terrell Lewis and Anthony Jennings playing so well together again in this game. Anthony Jennings would have been another standout this week had it not been for just the discipline, lack of discipline on several penalties that he got, lining up off sides, and you just can't do that and giving up extending plays with penalties. But Terrell Lewis is a defensive standout player of the game for me. He showed explosiveness off the ball. He made some sacks in this game, some quarterback hurries. He almost had an interception. I think he's carrying the ball around this week to get a feel for the ball because he almost had the interception. I think he's kicking himself for not getting it, but really made a difference, disrupting the quarterback and making a difference on defense. I think another player that I've always given a lot of standouts to is Xavier McKinney, but in this game, his tackles were spot on. He did a good job of pass coverage. He really did a job of running down and spying the quarterback, coming up from his safety positions. And he was able to get back and cover on as well. Several times the commentators made the statement that he was coming up and they were going to throw over top of him, but he was in a great position every time they threw the ball, in a great position to stop the run as well. So Xavier McKinney is my other defensive standout player of the game. On special teams, Jalen Waddle was a standout player. I've already named him for offense, so I have to go with Ali Cahoe on special teams. It's something about Cahoe, his aggressive nature, his passion. You can just see it, his attitude come out when he's playing. And he himself gets to the punter back there by himself, been close to blocking several kicks, but blocked a kick in this game. In a previous game, he took one back for a touchdown, he recovered, and that Terrell Shavers missed. But this time, he makes the block, and Terrell Shavers picks it up for the touchdown. So Ali Cahoe is a standout player on the special teams. So our standout players for the game this week were Jalen Waddle, Landon Dickerson, Deontay Brown on offense, Terrell Lewis and Xavier McKinney on defense, and Ali Cahoe on special teams. Well, here on our third and final segment today, we're going to preview the upcoming game against the University of Tennessee Volunteers. Well, the one thing you can always say in this is a heated rivalry. Now, I had some conversations with some people who think that maybe this rivalry is on the down side because of the streaks. But I want to give you, before we start talking about the preview of the game, just a little history of this Tennessee rivalry. I think the reason that it's on the downside is because the young players today, the culture of the day is they really don't know the history of this rivalry. But this rivalry began back in 1928. General Robert Neyland was the coach at Tennessee, and he had an up-and-coming team in 28 and 29, and he wanted to start challenging Alabama, who was the leader in what was called the Southern Conference at that time, and he wanted to be a challenge. So he did everything he could to whip up the sentiment against Alabama and try to make this a rivalry. And it started with his traditional date as the third Saturday in October was when they would play. And he did a good job. I think it was officially named the third Saturday in October in 1939. And both General Neyland and then also later in life Bear Bryant did a great job of keeping this rivalry going. Now, the reason I say that it's not down because of the streak that Alabama's on, this rivalry has been a rivalry of streaks. And the streaks go all the way back into the 30s. When there was some streaks that established where Alabama would go on a 7-game winning streak, and then Tennessee would have a winning streak. I know Alabama is currently experiencing 12 games a winning streak, but there were times when Tennessee would be on winning streak as well. I think Johnny Majors led the Vols to an upset victory over Bear Bryant in 1982 to stop a winning streak. And that time Alabama had an 11-game winning streak over Tennessee, and Johnny Majors led them to a victory. Between 86 to 94, Alabama had a 9-game winning streak, 86 to 94 over Tennessee. But in 1995, the Volunteers beat Alabama to stop that, and they went on their own 7-game winning streak after that until 2002, when Alabama finally defeated Tennessee. But between 1995 and 2002, Tennessee went on a 7-game winning streak against Alabama. And one fact out there that for all your history buffs need to know is that Tennessee is the only team to ever own a 7 consecutive victory over Alabama. The only team to ever beat Alabama 7 consecutive victories. So that's why this is a heated rivalry. It's a border war. They compete against some of the same players. There's been a lot of things on each side. Back in 1950, one of the greatest stories that comes out of this rivalry is that in the 50s, Jimmy Goostree was athletic trainer for Alabama, and in breaking one of those streaks, when Alabama finally goes in there and wins, he breaks out a case of cigars and gives a cigar to everybody, and everybody lights up. So now the tradition has started that the winner of the Tennessee game smokes a cigar. It was kept secret for a while because that's an NCAA violation to give something to someone that's a benefit. It's also a violation for the use of tobacco products. So it was done in secret. But in 2005, they renewed this tradition, and they just made it public that they're going to smoke cigars. And every year, whichever winning team is, they have to report a violation to the NCAA of the impermissible benefit. It's a minor violation, and it's a badge of honor now to be able to report that. Going forward, as far as smoking the cigar, that's where that tradition comes from. So a lot of this history, steeped in tradition, a rivalry that's been made, a lot of voices on each side. Philip Fulmer talking bad about Alabama. You got Roger Schultz, who goes up there and makes a statement that Alabama ought to pay property taxes on Neyland Stadium because they own it. There's a lot of talk going on each side. But at the end of the day, when it goes down to playing the game, it's a game about who's got the best players. And this year, like in the 12 years past, I believe it's going to continue for Alabama to get a victory because we have the best players. Now, Jimmy Pruitt comes in as another Nick Saban protege. So Nick Saban has a chance to beat another one of his proteges and go 19-0 against his proteges, against his coaches that have coached for him that's gone on for a head coach. But I think Jeremy Pruitt's a good coach, but he just doesn't have the talent. Now, does that mean that Tennessee can't win this game? No. I remember a time where Lane Kiffin brought an untalented Tennessee team into the University of Alabama, the Bryant-Denny Stadium, and almost left with a victory. It had not been for the block made by Mount Cody in that game. So we saw last week South Carolina going in between the hedges and beating Georgia. So any team in the SEC team can win if it goes your way. A lot of turnovers, a lot of problems can move the game in Tennessee's favor. But if Alabama comes out like I think they will and establish the run, throw the passing game in like they've been doing, plays well on defense, I think Alabama limits the turnovers, limits the penalties, and then they're going to win this game and win it handily. I look for Tua to come out and establish the passing game and the running game in this. I don't think Tennessee's defense is up to stopping us. I think we have better players. The old saying is it's not always X's and O's, it's Jimmys and Joes. And I think Alabama has those talented athletic players that Tennessee just doesn't have now. I think our defense is going to be putting pressure on the quarterback, whichever quarterback plays, either Maurer or Guantino. Either one that plays, I think, will be pressured in this game. I think Terrell Lewis has a big game. I think Christian Barrymore puts pressure on the up front. I think our young defensive linebackers played well in this game. I look for Christian Harris and Shane Lee and Markel Benton to make some tackles in this game. And overall, I believe when it's all said and done that Alabama comes out with a victory. Jerry Jeudy's been quiet the last couple of games. Look for Jerry Jeudy to have a big game in this game. I think Tennessee's always been known as wide receiver U and can take the ball deep and throw deep balls. I look for Jerry Jeudy to get wide open going deep on a couple of these and Tua to hit him and on some of these deep passes and score. And I believe Alabama can score whenever they want to in this game. That's just my opinion. As long as they're hitting on all cylinders. So I look for Alabama to win this game. I look for it to be a big victory. I know it's against one of his proteges that he doesn't want to run the score up against, but in this game I think it's going to be hard to keep the score down. I look for Alabama to, at the end of the day, to beat the Tennessee Volunteers on the 3rd Saturday in October in Bryant-Denny Stadium under the new lights. And the final score, in my opinion, will be Alabama 59, Tennessee 17. Well, that's all for the DC Capstone Report this week. Thank you again for our listeners. I hope you tune in next week. I will be at the stadium, and I'm hoping to have some live shots of the band. If you're a million dollar band supporter, some live shots of the band. Also have some live shots of the new lighting. So tune into our live feed at the Facebook DC Capstone Report page on Facebook to get those live shots from the game this Friday. Thanks, and have a great week.